this is all part of Prime Barrel Academy series, where we get insiders like yourself talk to bourbon aficionados, not necessarily novices or just casual drinkers, about stuff that would be interesting to them, but it's still very much relatable to the final product and really what makes every producer different. And I think you have a lot to talk about. So let's get started on, I guess, the farming component of it and how that's important to the whiskey production.
Sure. I mean, all whiskey comes from grain. Just like I find it really ironic in the wine world, everybody talks about the grapes and where they came from and how they're grown and all the nuances of the grapes. But in the whiskey world, rarely do people talk about the grains and how they were grown or where they were grown and even the specific varieties of grain and everything else. And wine or grapes is to wine what grain is to whiskey. And so without grain, you don't have a whiskey. And usually it's like the 10th thing that a distillery talks about. They talk about the water, the barrel, and all these other things. But without grain, you wouldn't have whiskey. And so we really focus on the grains, and we want to grow all of our grains in a way that encourages quality, not necessarily quantity. And we do that every day. We sacrifice that quantity for quality by growing it ourselves. And with anything, with better inputs, you end up with better outputs. And I really relate it to wine a lot because they do talk about the farming aspect and the growing the grapes and everything. And there's a saying in the wine world that you can't make good wine out of bad grapes. It's like that with anything. And so by starting off with the best, most pure ingredients, it's the best chance to get the best quality final product. And so by growing all of our own grains, it's the best way that we ensure that we get exactly what we want and how we want it. And so it all starts with the first thing you do is seed selection. So, I mean, there's hundreds, if not thousands of different varieties of each type of grain that are available on the market to buy. And then it even goes even further, like wheat, for example. There's soft white winter wheat, there's hard white winter wheat, there's soft red winter wheat, there's hard red winter wheat, and there's each one of those in spring wheat. So there's winter varieties, there's spring varieties. So the difference between those is the winter varieties you would plant usually in the late fall. Spring varieties you plant in the early spring. And I like winter varieties. So we plant winter wheat, winter rye, and winter barley because the plants grow really slow all winter, and it's called stool out. And what that means is they're actually growing beneath the soil, and they're getting this really healthy root system that goes down. And once it becomes warm, they start to grow up. But it already has this massive, nice root system. Now, a spring variety, we actually harvest a spring variety pretty close to the same time as we do a winter variety. But the winter variety goes from seed all the way to maturity in a longer period of time. It grows slower. And anytime anything grows slower, traditionally it's better quality. So you get a fast growing tree, a lot of times they get diseases and they have a lot of problems and they don't last a long time, but you get a slow growing oak tree, it's sturdier, better. But also it gets that really massive root system in the winter that stools out. So then it can withstand a little bit of a drought, or it can absorb the nutrients out of the soil better and things like that, rather than going from zero from the spring all the way to maturity, in the same short period of time. And so usually we'll plant winter wheat, winter rye, winter barley. There's no such thing as winter corn. Corn actually needs a lot of heat. It cannot withstand a frost. So usually around here we'll plant corn around May 10th, because that's kind of the magic date that there's very low chance of a late frost. But it has enough warmth, and the soil's warm enough that it'll germinate and everything else. Ironically, in the malt house, we see the same thing. For example, if we are malting rye in the malt house, we actually have to usually turn on the air conditioners and really cool it, because rye will grow in very cold temperatures. If it's corn, we actually have to turn on the heaters and warm it up for it to allow it to germinate and start malting that corn. Barley and wheat are kind of in the middle, where they don't, they need a little bit of cool, but a little bit of heat. But it's kind of ironic that it's the same thing. Rye is really vigorous. It's a cold weather plant. It needs that cold winter, to grow and stool out really slow, which we see also in the malt house. So it comes with seed selection first. Every year we do several trials on the farm, where we plant the majority of what we know we like and what works. And we might plant another 3, 4, I think last year we actually did 10 different varieties of corn that we're testing. And we want to test a lot of things. We want to test how they grow, how they mill, so that means how they break down. Sometimes they might not mill right or something like that. How they mash in and ferment and how they taste afterwards. So there's a lot of things that we're looking at for each variety specifically. But like I said, sometimes we'll play around with different varieties. If we like one, we'll maybe plant a little more next year. We'll never really just plant it all until several different years of trials, because that's the one thing, is every year is completely different in Mother Nature. It's never exactly the same. And so traditionally we'll do several years of trials before we implement something big and start using it. Oats is another thing that we used a lot of different varieties. Oats are actually 60% hull, which the hull is actually the protective coating around the actual grain itself. It's 60% hull, so imagine like a shell basically around it. And so the hull is really a nuisance in the distillery. It floats to the top of the fermenter. It creates this big old massive mat on the top, and it's almost like, imagine like wine, how the grapes, float to the top. You're trying to push it down, and I actually walked across it. It was so dense and firm and everything. So those holes were a nuisance. So we said, there's a variety of oats called, they're nuda oats. So it's basically naked oats, and they don't have a hole. They're hull-less oats. And so we tried those, but they tasted completely different. And so then we went back to a hulled variety of oats and actually bought a machine that's called a dehuller that takes the hulls off of the oats. But that's what's really fun as a farmer, is figuring all this out and making it all right. So that all has to do with like the seed selection, which is the first part that we have to figure out on the farm. So the next thing we do is soil prep. So we'll prep a field. We'll take soil tests. The soil tests say what that ground is lacking, what it maybe has a lot of, and you run a really balanced soil. If we put too much fertilizer of a certain kind of fertilizer on, that doesn't help us if it's too much. And you need a really balance of all of them. And we're also looking at things in the soil like sodium and calcium that maybe isn't a fertilizer necessarily, but high sodium isn't a good environment for the plants to grow. So we want to do something to counteract that high sodium. Or if it's very alkaline, we want to put on a soil amendment. So there's two things we can do for the soil. We put on a soil amendment, which is what fixes the soil. It helps create a better environment for the plant to actually grow in. Or there's fertilizer, what the plant actually needs to grow and survive. So we're looking at both of those with the soil test. So then we prep the soil, we put on what it needs. Russell has a saying that he always tells everybody, because Russell's also a certified crop consultant. So he really understands, our master distiller really understands the farming side, but also the distilling side. Because I think there's often a disconnect between farmers don't really know what the distillers need or want, and the distillers don't really know what's possible on the farm. And so he has a saying that he says that farmers will put a little bit of a fertilizer on and get great results, or they get great results. So they put more on and they become one, because too much of a good thing's a bad thing. And you guys probably haven't been around piles of fertilizer before, but we'll get a pile of fertilizer here. You've never seen a weed grow in a pile of fertilizer. You know what I mean? It's too much of whatever that particular fertilizer is. So we're really trying to balance the soil. We don't want to waste anything or anything like that. The other thing we'll look at is if it doesn't have a lot of sodium in it and it needs nutrients like potash and phosphate, we will bring in quite a bit of manure from the dairy next door, which is really good for the soil. Manure has pretty much every available nutrient that a plant might need. And so we'll bring that, we'll spread it on the field, which is great because they're actually feeding those same cows the mash, the byproduct from the distillery. So it's this nice little circle. And so we'll prep the field in that way and mix in and incorporate that manure into the soil, and it gets a lot of organic matter, and then also a lot of like, where it holds the moisture, compost, like, composting and things like that really help hold in the moisture and nutrients that the plant needs. Then another thing that I could back up a little bit is crop rotation. So like, we never want to grow the same field and the same crop year after year after year. What'll happen is certain plants use certain nutrients out of the soil, so you're depleting all of those nutrients and maybe not other nutrients. And then also you get a buildup of certain bugs and pests and other problem type that certain crops are susceptible to that maybe other crops aren't. So if we always rotate our crops, it's really a good natural way to combat bugs and problems and other pests and things like that. And so we always rotate from alfalfa. So alfalfa is a legume. legumes fix their own nitrogen into the soil. So it's a good natural way. Now wheat, rye, barley, and corn need nitrogen, so it's a good way to put it back in the soil naturally. And then alfalfa also has a deep taproot that goes down deep in the soil, and that deep taproot goes down. And when you take the alfalfa out and you plant wheat, rye, or barley, the deep roots break down and kind of compost naturally in the soil and actually create water percolation, because they've loosened up that hard pan that's down deep in the soil that those roots are strong enough to push down into. And so it's really good for that also. I mean, we're always worried about or always looking at water percolation here, because if you ever notice, like a potted plant always has a hole at the bottom of the plant. It's never a bowl without a hole in it, because the plant actually needs oxygen and stuff to grow into the soil. It never wants to grow. There's certain plants, I take it back, that grow underwater or whatever, but none of the ones that we're growing here. And so we want that drainage. We want that soil to be, and water to be able to percolate and get out of the soil and just keep a nice damp, oxygen-filled environment for that plant to work in. So then we'll plant our crops. What's great about our particular area here is we have a reservoir, and we irrigate the crops when they need to get irrigated, not when Mother Nature depends on it. You know, a lot of places in the Midwest have to rely on rainfall, which is fine. But traditionally, it's either feast or famine. It's you get a drought, or you don't have enough water, you're flooding, or it's you're dusty. And rarely is it just the perfect amount at the perfect time and everything else. And so we're really lucky. We get very little rainfall here, but we get beautiful water that comes from both sides of Lake Tahoe, down the Truckee and the Carson rivers, to LaHonte Reservoir, where we actually store our water from. And so we get that beautiful, we call it Sierra snowmelt, that comes down and we irrigate all of our crops with. And we can actually time it right, which is great, because then we can do things if we want that change the plants, like drought stressing it. We can overwater it, which I don't know why anybody ever would, but you can overwater it. A lot of times overwatering a plant's worse than underwatering it sometimes in our particular clay soils and everything here, and depending on what the crop is, makes a lot bigger difference. But particularly hay, they say that a lot more hay is killed in our area by overwatering it than underwatering it. But anyways, we water it when it needs to get irrigated, which you can kind of change the properties of the plant by drought stressing it, or irrigating it when it needs to and everything else. And the way that we irrigate is it's all flood irrigated. So we have 2 levees, and our fields are perfectly level from side to side. So if we actually have GPS leveling systems that go on our tractors, and they automatically raise and lower a scraper. And if it's reading a little bit high, it'll automatically lower and dig out the hole or the hill. Or if it's reading a little bit low, it'll automatically raise and fill in the hole. And so it's perfectly flat from levee to levee in our fields. Then as you go down the fields, every 100 feet you go down the field, usually it goes down depending on the field, but typically it's about 2/10 of a foot. So a little over 2 inches per 100 feet it goes down. So it really flows real slow right underneath the plant. Now the importance of that is wheat, rye, and barley all grow at the top of the plant. Corn it grows kind of in the middle of the plant. So if we're relying on Mother Nature or sprinklers or anything like that, all that water would be filtering over the grain itself. Now you have mold, mildew, fungal type problems that we've never had here, because it's so dry, it's not very humid. All the water goes right at the base of the plant, gets into the roots, and doesn't come in contact with the actual grain itself. And so we can actually get our grain, which is fairly rare, to dry down enough in the field, and never had to spray fungicides or any other type products like that on our crops. We can also get it to dry down, because we're so dry here. We can get it to dry down to a low enough moisture content that it'll store over years and years, whereas a lot of places have to use big commercial dryers or something like that. They use a tremendous amount of propane or natural gas or something to dry the grain down so that it won't mold or rot inside the silos. Because we're so dry here, we don't have that problem. And so, there's so
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
So bringing it a little bit back to, I guess, whiskey world, there's a lot of expressions right now that people see on the shelves that say grain to glass. And you and I were talking last time we were here, and you said there's a big difference between grain to glass and ground to glass. Mm-hmm. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, like we like to call it ground to glass, because we have total control from the ground to the glass. Now, In my experience and head, if you buy grain and you make it into a whiskey, that could be considered grain to glass, which is, now there's nothing wrong with non-distiller producers, NDPs. They buy whiskey and put it in their package and resell it. There's nothing wrong with that. But somebody that's grain to glass, that even buys the grain and makes it into whiskey, is one step like more work than them. But we're ground to glass, where we grow the grains, make the whiskey, and package it and sell it ourselves also. And so we have total control over the entire process. So from like we talked about earlier, seed selection, growing the grains, everything in the fields first, from harvesting the grains, storing it in the silos, milling it, mashing it, fermenting it, distilling it, aging it, bottling it. It all happens right here. We have total control. And the best way to ensure that no corners are getting cut and it's the way that you want it is to do it yourself and to really watch every part of it. And so from the beginning, we told, Russell's been here, our master distiller, but from the beginning we said we're gonna do it the right way, not necessarily the easy way, unless it happens to be the right way too, and not the cheap way. Like, I don't care if it takes a little bit longer, a little bit more money or whatever. That's okay if it makes a better quality whiskey. That's what we were going for from the beginning. And so we can do that because we have total control over the entire process and not just buying whiskey, on the open market. Or
related to Michael's question, can you speak to the recent development of the Estate Whiskey Alliance?
Yeah, great question.
And why that's important to you and how it's important for whiskey production?
Yeah, so when we started, we actually called ourselves Frey Ranch Estate Distillery, because we kind of took it off the wine world. An estate winery is 100% controlled by the winery, the grapes. And we thought, we're the same, let's call it an estate distillery. Well, in the whiskey world and really the spirits world, estate didn't mean a lot. There's several distilleries that, maybe they call it estate because it's the name of their estate, their property or whatever, but they don't grow the grains. There's a couple, there's a vodka that says they're a single estate vodka. Well, if you look on their website, it says they bought it all from one farmer down the road or whatever, and it all came from a single estate. So it didn't mean anything. But the University of Kentucky just created the Estate Whiskey Alliance, which we're happy to be part of. And it's kind of bringing that term back to where it's distilleries that thrive to grow and have total control like we do. And it's really neat because there is actually some pretty major distilleries that are part of it that don't grow all their grains right now, but they might grow some of them and a little portion and make it. But it's really rewarding and almost validates what we've always done, because other people are starting to do it and see the value in growing the grains and having total control over the entire process, and kind of bringing it back to where I think whiskey started. Whiskey started on the farm, and then it got away from it to this big commercial process, and now I'm hoping it goes back to the farm. And that's my goal, or my dream, is to have Frey Ranch kind of be the leader of the farm or the estate distilling movement.
I think when you and the Prime Barrel first kind of got together, I think what stuck out to me personally is your experience on farming. Because I don't know if people realize that you were farmer first, distiller second. Now you obviously have a pretty big operation distilling. But those roots to which you alluded to earlier, they really translate into the quality of the product. And once people try the Frey Ranch, I think they keep coming back to it. From the quality assurance standpoint, what do you look for, just in terms of, you've mentioned all that laborious process of farming and then actually the whiskey making itself. What do you look for? What levers do you pull to get the whiskey to where it is in a bottle?
Well, and that kind of goes back to the entire process. So, it's starting off with the best ingredients, with the best grains, first. Putting them up at the right moisture and paying attention to anything so that nothing can go bad with those, because if it does, then the quality goes down in the distillery. And so there's a saying that it's, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time, right? And so we look at each different aspect of the entire process. So first we look at the farm and we really hone in and we want to do it right. Then we look at the mill, and then we look at the mash cookers and the enzymes and the malt and the everything, and then we look at the fermentation part, and then we look at the stills, and it's really not cutting corners at any aspect. And so we use a roller mill because sometimes hammer mills heat up and it actually starts to cook the grains. So even though a roller mill, you might yield a little bit less per batch of whiskey, I feel like it's better quality because it's not cooked where, like, maybe when you start the mill, it's not heated up yet. By the end of your mill session or whatever, it might be warm and the grain's different, you know, and it's all about consistency from batch to batch. So you look at that and really focus, what's the best roller mill now instead of a hammer mill, and we're sacrificing that quantity for the quality in that particular area. Then we go to the mash cookers and we want to cook it to the exact right temperature. If you cook it too high, you burn it. If you don't cook it high enough, you don't get that conversion of starch to sugars. And then you pay attention to the fermenters, and we have two different yeasts. We actually use a dry and a liquid yeast. Liquid yeast is more for flavor and quality, like, you know, that mouthfeel and everything. The dry yeast is more for alcohol production. And then we take it to the stills, and each still, we have two different kinds of stills. We have a continuous still and a pot still, and they're both good for different reasons. The continuous still can do quantity, but the pot still, we can do quality. And so now, you know, by stripping everything in our continuous stills from 8% mash to 40% alcohol, then putting that 40% alcohol in the pot still, we're getting 5 times more volume per batch in the pot still now, rather than putting the 8% mash in there. We're getting the 40% in there, but while still being able to take the heads, the hearts, and the tails cuts, you know. And so we're focusing on that part. And then we're looking at the barrels. Each barrel, the staves are at a char 4 and the heads are at a char 3, because we like 4 a little bit better. It's a little sweeter and everything, but we really like the little bit of herbal flavors that we got from the 3s in a smaller way. And so we put those on the, you know, on the heads and different char levels, but really focusing on that, exactly what we wanted. And then here in Nevada, we get really hot days and cool nights, but that allows the whiskey to expand during the hot summers, contract during the cold winters. But what we don't have, the one thing we don't have that's beneficial for aging whiskey is humidity, which we already talked about is good on the farm. We don't want that mold, mildew, fungus, everything. But in the barrel warehouse, we add humidity, which actually is good for quantity and quality, because at high humidity, you obviously lose less. There's less angel share. But number 2, at high humidity, you actually lose, you still have angel share, but at high humidity, you actually lose more alcohol than water, the ratio of alcohol to water. At low humidity, you actually lose more water than alcohol. So if you think about it, at low humidity, you're gonna lose more, but you're also, the proof is gonna go up in the barrel. The problem with that is when you want to cut it back to 90 proof or 100 proof or 107 or whatever you're cutting it back to, you have to add more water, and it's less concentrated and less flavorful. So humidity is actually good for quality and quantity. So we humidify the barrel warehouses to make sure that we're doing everything the right way. And so, and then we looked at the bottle, like we wanted to have a really a special bottle that meant a lot. So if you look at our bottle, the label is the yellow color of the corn. It wraps all the way around like a belt buckle that my grandpa gave to my dad and my dad gave to me, the belt buckle part. The top is in the shape of a bolt. So it's made out of recycled metal, and it's really heavy. But if you look at the bottom, it says, be good to the land and the land will be good to you. And that's really like the motto as a farmer. Because if we don't take really good care of our soil and our natural resources and our climate and the, you know, all of the different aspects, we don't have a future. And my real goal in life and my dream is to pass on the farm to my kids someday. And to do that, I got to take really, I can't take from the farm or the soil or everything without giving back and making sure that they're going to be successful here. So, so kind of it's this whole circle. You can't just take one part of it and do really good at one, but then not at another. And we really want to focus on every aspect, kind of like the elephant thing. And I equate it to fertilizer, kind of like this is the same thing with fertilizer, you know, different fertilizers, but this is the whiskey and everything. If you take this barrel and you take the head off right here, and you take these staves, and if each stave represents a different part of the distillery and the operations and the bottle and the, you know, grains and everything else, each one's different. Now, if one stave is down here, and all the other ones are up here, and you try to fill up that barrel, it's only going to fill up as tall as the shortest stave. And so every stave we have to try to get as high as we can. It doesn't make any sense if one stave's way up here and then all the other ones are down there. We got to do a really good job at everything so that we can fill our barrel as much as we can. And it's the same thing with fertilizer and farm, but it's business, and it's just the way that everything should be.
Colby, I've got a couple of questions that kind of simplify things, not from, it's all about agriculture, but from a different perspective. This is the urban whiskey enthusiast who has never been to a farm, knows nothing about agriculture, but hears terms, for example, like cover crop.
Yeah.
Can you talk about just what some of those simple things that are common knowledge to you that,
Sure.
that the urban whiskey enthusiast wouldn't really have any insight to?
And why should they care?
Yeah, and so now cover crops are a bigger deal like in the Midwest where they have rolling hills and everything, and they have erosion problems. So a cover crop would be like, if you're gonna plant corn, usually you plant that in the spring. Well, all winter, their topsoil is eroding away, and so cover crops help hold the topsoil in. They also, when you take them out, they kind of break down and give nutrients for the plants and everything else. So a cover crop is usually a crop that you don't harvest. You plant it to basically hold the soil retention and the topsoil from eroding away, and kind of get it ready for a crop like soybeans or corn that you plant in the spring. Here, basically the same cover crops that they use in the Midwest are usually like a wheat, a rye, a barley, the plants that we grow already. And so we do have winter crops here but we take them all the way to maturity. Whereas traditionally, like in agriculture, wheat, rye, and barley are normally like a lower gross income per acre crop. So you'd plant wheat, rye, or barley, and then you take it out and you plant corn, which is kind of a moneymaker versus the other three. We don't do that here because we need the wheat, rye, and barley and want it. And so that's cover crops. I'm trying to think of what's another term that a lot of people might not know what it is or what it means.
You'd spoken a little earlier about winter wheat versus a different,
Like a spring wheat.
a spring wheat.
Yep.
Even red wheat versus white wheat.
Yeah.
I mean, I read these things, I see these things, but living in an urban setting, I just don't have a sense of what that really means from an agricultural perspective or how it relates to whiskey production.
Yeah, and so there's soft and hard, red and white. There's spring and winter. So winter are planted actually in the fall, and then they grow really all winter. The spring crops are planted in the spring, and they grow relatively fast, and they harvest. Usually around here, we'll harvest in late July, early middle August. A lot of times, and it depends on how hot the weather, the summer is, and how early the spring starts, and everything else. But anyways, and then if you go from red and white, they're really pretty different in color and the flavor of them, and really that has a lot to do with bread, particularly. So like different types of bread might use a red versus a white. It's color and a lot of flavor and things like that. And then there's hard and soft, and they actually mill differently. The hard and the soft, and it depends on what you're trying to do, your final product. And really, I think you could use all four of those for distilling purposes, would be fine. We just happen to like soft white winter wheat is what we grow here. And a lot of distilleries will use something else, or a lot of them use soft white winter wheat. But it's just what we like and what grows well here, but also tastes really good. And we really like our wheat's really kind of taken off, and so I'm glad we got that. We've been to lots of other distilleries. One that particularly does wheated bourbon's a big one, and we let them taste our 100% wheat whiskey, and they were all like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing. Like the master distiller, we went outside and he said, hey, I didn't want to say it in front of everybody else in there, but your wheat's really freaking good. Like it's, oh my God, like, like it was cool. It was really kind of fun for us to.
I think most people look at it as not a marketing ploy, but like they learn about those things reading the whiskey labels, right? That's manufacturers would put that, hey, made from red wheat or whatever, red wheat whiskey. And to Gary's point, like I don't know how many people actually realize the difference. So like how like why is it important?
And they're all good in their own different ways, and there's nothing wrong. But one thing I find ironic is like I talked to a distiller in Kentucky, and they're like, oh, it doesn't matter, mash bill, just throw in some corn and some rye or barley or corn, wheat and barley, and you'll be fine. Like, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like come and taste our 100% barley, 100% corn, 100% wheat, 100% rye, and tell me that the mash bill doesn't matter. Like they're completely different, and then you throw in another grain like oats or triticale or, some of these other fun ones, and then you malt them, and then they're even more different, after you malt them. So grain matters. Mash bills really are important in the final run. But another thing you hear all the time is like sustainable or things like, buzzwords like that if you're the urban person. And farmers by nature, like we kind of talked about it a minute ago, but like at the bottom of our bottle, be good to the land and the land will be good to you. We kind of have to be sustainable by nature, but we're not sustainable because it's the latest buzzword or whatever. And it kind of bothers me. I don't want to fit myself in a box by having some certificate that somebody else tells me is important because it might be in their area, but not here or whatever. Anywhere you go in the world, agriculture is completely different. And so our goal from the beginning is to take really good care of the natural resources, our environment, everything else. And so we actually feel like we're one of the most sustainable distilleries in the country, but not because that's a buzzword or we want it to be. And I want it to be like the 10th thing we talk about, because the most interesting thing I want everybody to think about when they think about Frey Ranch is that we grow all of our grains and we malt our barley and we have total control. But one thing is, like, all of our byproducts go to the dairy next door, the solids. They get fed to the dairy cows. The dairy cows make manure. We spread that fertilizer or that manure on our field. So we have to buy little, if any, commercial fertilizer, which commercial fertilizer traditionally comes from Canada, Germany, Russia, South Africa, like all over the world. And you think about how much energy it takes to refine it first and then to get it from there to here in Fallon, Nevada. It's a tremendous amount of energy where we just take a natural byproduct next door and get all the same or more benefits from it. Then the liquid goes into our irrigation system. The liquid's very acidic. That acidic liquid helps balance the pH in our soil. Our soil's a little on the alkaline side, so a little bit of a high pH. So that acidic liquid, lower pH, helps balance the soil so we can grow a better crop. We're actually able to benefit from it. And I had a guy that stopped by the distillery from Truckee, California, and he said just to dump this liquid down the storm drain, they'd have to put 20 parts water to every 1 part of this liquid just to dump it and get rid of it. Well, that's like hundreds of thousands of gallons we'd have to mix with it to just dump it down the drain, whereas we're actually able to benefit from it by putting it on our soil and improving our soil in a meaningful way naturally. Then all of our grains literally come surrounding the distillery. I mean, just on the other side of the distillery over here, right next to it, is we're growing a beautiful rye field. The next field over is going to be corn, and it's all right here surrounding it. Like literally, like the furthest trip is probably the farm's a couple miles, around, all dirt roads that comes in a John Deere tractor in. Whereas a lot of distilleries in Kentucky and other places haul in, particularly like rye, they'll haul it in from Germany, all the way from Germany or Canada, places like that. And you think about how much energy it takes to go on the boat from Germany and then go to the port and go all the way to Kentucky. Whereas we're able to literally right next to it and bring it right here. And it's beautiful, amazing rye. All of our cooling water comes from a reservoir that we have right here on the farm. So we have, we priced it out or checked it out, looking at chillers, big antifreeze, like basically food grade antifreeze chillers to cool glycol, to cool the stills and cool the fermenters and everything. It'd be hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of electricity per year, just to put it in perspective, to cool the stills and the fermenters and everything. Whereas being right here on the farm, we just use water from a reservoir that's already here. It comes from one side of the reservoir, goes through the distillery and right back to the reservoir. So we're not consuming anything like that. And then the ground naturally cools it back to, we want it below 70 degrees. And traditionally our ground here is relatively cooler than that, and naturally cools it back down and goes right back into the still. So really like beneficial by being here on the farm. But we do all that stuff not because it was trendy, but it's just the right thing to do. We don't want to consume if we don't have to. We don't want to use anything that isn't right. We want to leave this farm to our kids in really good condition. And I'm hoping that hopefully they want to take it over. If they don't, then whatever, it's fine.
A related question, just again, the urban whiskey enthusiast. We hear terms like yellow corn and white corn, yellow dent corn. What are the differences? Does it have an impact on the end result, the flavor of what goes in the bottle?
It does. And so the biggest, like we use yellow dent corn. There's white corn, there's red corn, there's blue corn. I mean, there's tons of varieties of corn, just like wheat also, and they call them heirloom varieties, and it's different than like your heirloom tomatoes are like better than everything. But in my opinion, there's a reason why like there's heirloom varieties of corn. They didn't taste as good, they didn't grow as good. Something wasn't right with them, so they just didn't become commercially viable. And so yellow dent corn is always, we've played around with different varieties, but it's always tasted the best, it mills the best, it ferments the best, it's got a huge starch content, which starch is, what we're looking for in the distillery. And the other corn just doesn't taste the same. And I think there's a reason why they're not readily available throughout the country. And they're kind of fun to maybe make a special whiskey out of a blue corn or a red corn or whatever. But yellow dent corn is like it's really good. Like I prefer it over the others. We've tried them. And there's another saying in the wine world, which we also carry over here, that you got to like what you make because you might end up drinking it all yourself. And so I really like the way that yellow dent corn like tastes versus the other corns, and that's what we're going to use then, you know.
Fair enough. I'm curious. One thing that impressed me as you walked us around the property was around the farm, that your family has been farming this land before Nevada was a state, back to the 1850s, 10 years before Nevada became a state. How did you make the pivot from producing grain to go to market to becoming farmers and distillers here at Frey Ranch?
That's a good question. And technically my family hadn't been farming this particular farm since 1854, but in the area. My grandpa actually bought this particular farm in 1944. And it was like the heart. It was like Fallon is the oasis in Nevada. And this was like the show place that a Senator Robert Douglas owned, and he built our house in 1918. And it was like, this was like and so it was my grandpa's dream to have this. And my grandpa didn't have a whole lot, but Senator Robert Douglas wanted my grandpa to have this place because he knew that my grandpa would take care of it, you know, when he got older and everything. And so, anyways, it's a little bit of a different mindset, but not really. Like farmers are always used to overcoming obstacles and changing. It's like we look at things as if, well, and this isn't necessarily answering your question, but there's always going to be problems. You're always looking at things. You're always focusing on whatever you're looking at, and then you move on. But there's always going to be problems. It's not if there's going to be a problem, but it's when and how bad. And so we focused on like the grain particularly itself. So like when we're growing it for the open market, grain is a commodity. It's set on the Chicago Board of Trade. It kind of goes up and down like a stock, right? There's very few, if any, quality incentives in grain. So usually you just get what you get. And traditionally, like we don't have them here because we do a lot of forage here. We're not a lot of grain. We've always grown grain, but smaller quantities than other areas. So, but traditionally areas like ours would have a co-op where we all sell our grain to the co-op. They have giant silos. They put everybody's grains. There might be 20, 50, 100, whatever farmers put all their grain together. So you don't know exactly how it was grown, what was done to it, you might know it's soft white winter wheat, but you don't know the exact variety or any specifics about it or anything like that. And so, so what we did is we really focused and tried to figure out what do we want on the distilling side and how are we going to get that on the farming side. And so one good example is nitrogen fertilizer. When you use a lot of nitrogen fertilizer, you put on more nitrogen traditionally up until a certain point when you become a moron, like we talked about earlier, but usually you get more yield, right? Problem with nitrogen fertilizer is nitrogen boosts protein in grain. Now protein and starch are inverse. When one goes up, the other goes down. So it's kind of like this. So you boost the protein, your starch goes down. We're looking for starch in the distillery. So we could put on a bunch of nitrogen, but that actually hurts us because now we have lower starch, higher proteins. Proteins are kind of a nuisance in the distillery. They create like a haze and like this funky like thickness to it and everything. So we want low proteins, high starch. So we sacrifice and put on less nitrogen. We sacrifice yield. Now, ironically, on the open market, the biggest consumer of grain is the cattle industry. Cattle need protein. So the farmer, if I was selling it on the open market, would say, put on a little more nitrogen, I get a bigger yield, it has more protein, it's good for the animals, everybody's happy. But by growing it ourselves, that's when we can ensure and sacrifice that quantity for quality, which is what we do all the time. And that's the biggest difference. Like before, I'd maybe put on a little more nitrogen, get a bigger crop, sell it to an animal feed place and be fine. But now we sacrifice that quantity for quality, which we do, all the time.
Let's get you out on this. Next time somebody walks into a liquor shop, looks at hundreds of different expressions, and sees a Frey Ranch bottle, what should they expect and why should they care and why should they pick it up?
Yeah, like our goal from the beginning was to really showcase the grains that are in the whiskey. And so like, I love it when you taste our bourbon, like because I've tasted all 4 grains by themselves, wheat, rye, barley, and corn, I can pick out all 4 when I'm tasting it. It's really fun for me to experience that. Our rye is 100% rye. It's super easy on the mash bill because we started off, we didn't want to influence it by any other grains. And so we did 100% rye. I fell in love with it. And we just said, well, even though it's a pain in the ass to make, we kept doing it because we wanted to taste like that, you know? And so I really want them to look at it and really like, I want to take them to the grains and back to the start of it, which is agriculture. You know, if it's not mined or grown, it doesn't exist, right? And so really like think about that and maybe talk in their backyards about, you know, growing the grains kind of like they do in the wine world.
Yeah. Sounds good. Thank you.
Cool.
This was amazing. Let's go celebrate our pick with.
Let's go blow a cannon up.
Yes. There you go. There you go.
That's not
There you
blowing.
go.
That's not blowing.